The Citizen Mike Show. News. Commentary. Interviews. Citizen Mike Show starts now.
Hey, if it's 9 at night, it's Citizen Mike. Welcome to the Citizen Mike Show. Thanks for tuning in. We do appreciate it. My name is Mike Berdinsky. This is the episode for October 26, 2017. We left Ralph Tomaselli back at the office at the Record Journal. But we have two guests in the studio. Both are running for town council. We have a challenger, the Democrat, Jaime Hine, who's on the set, and Christopher K. Shortell, the incumbent Republican. Thanks, guys, for coming on the show.
Thanks
We're going to solve all problems tonight. The format that I have in mind, we're going to throw out some topics, give it to you guys, see what you think. I'm going to weigh in as I usually do. Jaime, this is the second time you're on the show. I think the first time it had to do with the Pat Wall Field controversy.
Yep.
May go back a couple of years, I'm not sure. Just a quick introduction of Jaime Hine. He is a law partner of the firm Mulvey, Oliver, Gould & Crotty with offices in Hamden. Christopher K. Shortell, folks know, as an incumbent on the Wallingford Town Council. Guys, before I get into the details, I wanted to put a sample ballot on the screen so there's no confusion as to what's going on with the show. This is not an election of Hine versus Shortell, Shortell versus Hine. And when I came into the driveway of the WPA studio, I realized there may be some confusion about that. You guys are not trying to bounce the other off necessarily.
You can vote for both of us.
You can vote for both.
With a clear conscience.
Yeah. So this is the ballot that was printed in the Record Journal, the sample ballot. And the red arrows point to the charter revision question, which we're going to get to in about 15 or 20 minutes. That's the red arrows. But the green and the blue remind us that we can vote for up to any 9 candidates for the town council. You can vote for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9 in any combination. So as Chris just indicated, you could vote for both Jaime Hine, Chris Shortell. You could take a vertical column there and vote for all 3, let's say on column 1A. You could vote for all 3 on the far left column. Any combination you want, you as the voter can do. Let's take that off the screen, Bruce. Guys, did I muff that explanation?
I think it was right on.
Yeah. Right on.
We want to know how you're going to vote. We can do a live fill-in of that. Let's do the Citizen Mike ballot. Let's do it. Let's just do it right now.
Secret ballots, you know.
Just fill it in while we're here.
Right.
They're wonderful
No pressure.
things. Okay, let's get to all these heavy issues that are out there. I don't know if they're issues, frankly, in the council campaign or not. But Jaime, the first one is to you. The first topic, really. It's not a question. I sense that one of the issues being bounced around is whether or not Wallingford is overtaxed. And I sense that the Democrats, not necessarily though, are saying yep, and the Republicans are saying no, but I don't know. What's your view? Is Wallingford overtaxed?
Mike, number one, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And yes, I do believe that Wallingford taxpayers are being overtaxed. If you take a look at the numbers, actual tax revenues have exceeded actual expenses every year since 2010. What that means is that Wallingford residents are being asked to pay more than what it actually costs to run the town. And if you take a look at those numbers, what you will find out is that since 2010, the average taxpayer's annual tax bill has gone up approximately $700. And in the meantime, the General Reserve Fund has increased a total of $9 million. And that's from 2010 through 2016. So in a 6-year span, taxpayers' bills have risen close to $700, and the General Reserve Fund has gone up a total of $9 million.
Chris, I want to get you on to answer this. Is what Jamie says true? Do you disagree?
His numbers sound correct to me,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't. He's a lawyer too, so I wouldn't challenge. You're both lawyers. I'm coming on the week before an election with two
No
Democrat lawyers.
fair
I deserve
playing the victim
something.
card. But
All
what do
right.
you think of his conclusion?
I think
on
his
it?
conclusion is half correct. I think that certainly Wallingford, the tax bill has gone up, as Jamie indicated, and there are two things driving that. And when you go back to 2010, the fund balance has gone up. I think $9 million was the number. The education budget has gone up $14 million since 2010. So I think that you have to look at the whole thing. The education budget is 2/3 of the town budget. It's easy to pick on one or the other. And I'm not saying we can't talk about the fund balance. We can, but certainly education dollars going up. We had an $86.7 million education budget in the 2011-2012 fiscal year. We have hit the $100 million mark in that budget as of the last budget. So let's talk about that. Maybe we spend too much in education as well. I don't know. But I do think that the education costs have gone up. And yes, the fund balance has gone up. And we can talk about, well, should we spend it? Should we use it? I think we can talk about that too.
I want to go back to some raw numbers. Bruce, we got a slide, I think, says surpluses on it or something like that. And this reviews the data that we've been talking about. Let's get that up there. This is a slide from actually an old show that Ralph and I did in the spring. And it shows a history of surpluses and deficits. And in red are operating deficits, which means that expenses exceeded revenues, and in black are surpluses, which means revenue. I hope I didn't get that backwards. The black, revenue exceeded expenses, and in red, expenses exceeded revenues. And that, of course, is a definition of a surplus or a deficit. So that's the history. And let's take that down, Bruce. And Chris, I want to go to you. So, okay, the point is being made. It's been made in the town council public questionnaire. I mean, it's just been made for the last couple of years. You have all these surpluses. Is that evidence that Wallingford has been overtaxed, or is that a benign fact?
I think in a large budget, you're going to have, what's the budget now? It's a $158 million budget, give or take. You're not going to budget that down to the penny. So I don't get hung up so much on the overtaxed part. I do get a little hung up on, well, what do we do with the surplus? I do get hung up on that. Maybe we might have some agreement on that. But as far as on the overtaxing part, the other thing I want to mention is, we deal with a municipality, any municipality, where, well, anywhere, not just a company, a municipality, salaries and benefits drive costs. We know this. If you go to McDonald's or if you go to the town of Wallingford, salaries and benefits, 80% of any budget. Well, in a municipality, those costs are union bargained, they're collectively bargained, so those costs are guaranteed to go up by a certain percentage each year. So your costs as a town are always going to go up just with that factor alone. So I don't get so much hung up on that. I don't think those numbers you put up are too outrageous given the size of Wallingford's budget. Again, I think what do we do with the surplus is a valid argument to have. And secondarily, again, Board of Education, they run surpluses too. And again, you talk about the question and answer period at town council meetings. Those same people generally don't go to the Board of Ed meetings. I was on the board for 2 years. I never saw them at one Board of Ed meeting. They're very quick to come to the town council. I'm not counting you, Jamie, in that. But I just think that's interesting that they won't touch the Board of Ed, but they'll come to the council. So.
Well, there's more than just people that go to town council meetings. Candidates have said that too. I think Jason Zandri in 2013 ran on the platform Wallingford is overtaxed. Obviously, he didn't do well and didn't strike responsive chords. But Jamie, I want to get your position clarified. Are you arguing for a zero tax increase? Are you arguing that there should be more precision in the budget? There should be substantially no surplus or deficit. I want to follow your argument to the logical conclusion. So if you're elected and everyone thinks like you,
Yeah.
what do we say come spring when we have the financial results?
Yeah. So I think at this point, a couple things. One is we definitely need a more accurate budget each year. That's for sure. When you take a look at the proposed budgets each year, there's a lot of fluff. And it's fluff that can easily be taken out, and I think ultimately you would end up with more accurate numbers. So everybody then starts off from a level playing field and everybody is on the same page. So that's number one. Two is when you take a look at the size of our reserve fund, at least right now, I think there's probably a good argument to be made that we should look very closely when the mayor proposes a tax increase. Because we are dealing with, at this point, what amounts to a $29.2 million fund balance. And when you consider that the state now is proposing to at least cut funding, which would cause us to dive into that fund a little bit. I think we need to start looking at that fund and how we can draw down that fund a little bit.
We're definitely going to get to that. I want to see if there's any common ground. It's not my job to stretch to find common ground. It's not what I do. But there may be, and the accuracy of budgeting is a point, Chris, that Jaime made a minute ago. Is there a point there that budgets have been too rough, too blunt, and more precision as possible, or not?
Yeah, there's a point there. I think it's common knowledge, if you look at the budget, that revenues are a little bit underestimated and expenses are, and expenses are overestimated.
I botched that.
I had to think about that.
You had it right.
I know, I had to think about that.
I think the last slide I botched that.
I think where I get, and I will say where there is also common ground probably is, as a counselor, is, our one job is to pass a budget. And our one job is to look at that. And where I've said this publicly on the council, we get a 96-page report every month, and it's basically scanned from some. I don't know if Barbara scans it, the town clerk, but it's a lot of info. The info's there, but it's just there's no summary. It's not. It's organized by department, but it is. You pour through it. At my job at Anthem, I work in a marketing department with a budget not less than the towns, but not insignificant, and maybe a $90 million budget. And you see a forecast after 3 months. The budget is out the window. It's the 3+9 forecast. It's the 6+6 forecast. So where I get frustrated as far as the information is when we're going into our budget deliberations in April. I get frustrated that the numbers we're working off of are based on the last budget. I would like more up-to-date numbers on where we are year to date, in April of a given year, as we're trying to make determinations.
So let me. That's a point. So what do you do? And Jaime, I want you to weigh in, but Chris mentioned it, so I want him to sort of follow that through. So what do you do? In April, you're going to be faced with the same procedure, the same process, the same data, the same format. Many of the same people sitting behind their chairs.
Right.
Are you the only one fighting this fight?
Not at all. There are a number of us on both sides of the aisle.
Are you saying that reform is in the wind?
No, I'm not saying that. we live in a. At the end of the day, we live in a strong mayor form of government. Yeah. Whoever the mayor is. I've talked to the mayor about it. Joe Marone's talked to the mayor about it. People have talked, and I don't want to start throwing names out and review. This is
private conversations.
Private conversations, breaking news, and this and Mike show.
Right.
But we've talked about it, and I will admit, the report we get, I'm less critical of the report that we get now than I was early on. When I spent the time to actually read it, there is a lot of info in there. So the info's there. I just get frustrated that when I go to work, it's sort of laid out for me and it's summarized, and it's not here. But we'll keep trying, but it's ultimately up to the administration. They'll give us what they're going to give us.
Jaime, your thoughts on what you might be in for based on what Chris just said?
I personally think that we need to be more aggressive on the council.
In what respect?
So, for example, it's clear, again, every year since 2010, the mayor has allocated a certain amount of the reserve fund that he's going to use towards operating expenses. And every single year, he's never touched that money at all. Okay? So when the mayor or the administration comes next year and says, you know, allocates that money again, I think there's got to be some tough questions on that issue. You take a look at the report even for this past year. He allocated $4.2 million. Did not touch a single penny of that. And in fact, it appears that the reserve fund has grown yet again. So not only did he not touch the reserve fund, but it's actually grown. And those are the types of things that I think we need to focus on. And not, you know, you don't have to be disrespectful, but I think you have to be aggressive on those issues.
Bruce, we have another slide. I think it's called Fund Balances. Let's get that up on the screen and we'll get some hard data, and maybe it illustrates some of what we're talking about. I didn't bring this all the way back to 2004. And if I did, the print would be so small it wouldn't be useful for a television or computer screen. But what I did go back to 2014, and the reason why it ends at 2016 and doesn't go into 2017, our fiscal year ends on June 30. And so these are from the audited financial statements effective June 30, 2016 is the most recent on the far right column. If you, my dear viewers, will focus on that column on the far right, the 2016, you can see categories which, when added, will total 29 million and change. I'm going to quickly run down those categories so we all can be on the same page. There's a very small category which we really don't have to talk about, but it's there, 126,000 for non-spendable, and basically that's like things like prepaid fuel. Let's move on. Other categories have to do with monies that the town council has decided to spend one day in the future, and so they set it aside and they commit to do that. And you don't want to promise or promise yourself to spend on something and not have that money set aside. So that's that second row, the committed row. This $4.2 million, which is in budget, it's that third row. That is an amount that is it's a product of a judgment call by the mayor and the comptroller. If after they add their numbers, revenues from outside sources, if revenues from outside sources don't equal expenses, where to get the money from? Well, you go into the reserve fund and you plug it into the budget, and it ends up being a large contingency fund. And the mayor does that every year. So there's $4.2 million in 2016 that the mayor said was, well, it's in the budget in case we need it, we'll go spend it. But as we see from the prior chart, it's rarely touched, but it does sort of soak up some money in the fund balance. Encumbrances are things that you bought and you're legally obligated to pay for. So those are encumbrances. A bill is going to come in for stuff that you bought. The credit rating amount of 15 million, almost 16 million, we've read a lot over the years about how the mayor and the comptroller set aside a certain amount of money to protect the credit rating. That is not a number that is dictated by the bond rating agencies. That is not a number dictated by statute or regulation. That is a judgment call by the administrations of each town. Actually, every town maybe do a little different. I am out there. I've been very obvious in my opinion that all of this money, the $15,900 or so, is not necessary to protect the credit rating. But you know, what is the magic number? There really isn't a hard, firm number that can be coldly calculated. It is a judgment call, but it could be less. And then what I call spare change, that's everything that's left over. That is discretionary money. It's utterly spendable by anyone's argument. And it all adds up to about $29 million, $29,250. If you compare that to what it was in 2014, you can see an increase in the grand total, but you got to take into account the categories. Chris, I want to go to you first. Bruce, you can take that down. Address my commentary. Comment on my commentary as I went down the
Lies.
chart.
All lies.
So if there's any dispute on my, let's get it out and see what we're talking
Those
about.
numbers all look correct.
Yeah.
I mean, I think so. There's a lot there. Number one, the bond rating is something that it's a choice. It's not an obligation. It's a choice. And the mayor is the mayor. The mayor gets to make that choice. I will go back to the Board of Education, though. I know we're discussing the surplus, but I worry about any conversation that's about drawing down a surplus. I feel like in these economic times we should be looking
The fund balance, you mean?
the fund balance.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the fund
Yeah.
balance. I feel like we should also look at cutting spending or looking at spending. To me, it's a holistic conversation. So I just have to make the point that it looked like from your chart the fund balance has grown by about $4 million since 2014. Well, 2014 was the year I got on the Board of Education. So what I'm about to say is going to incriminate myself because I've been voting on budgets since 2014 in this town. But when I got on the Board of Education in 2014, the Board of Ed budget was $93.7 million. It is now $100 million. So while the fund balance has increased $4 million, the Board of Ed spending has increased $7 million in the same time frame. Context. I'm just putting it out there for context. That's 2/3 of the budget. To take this back, though, other commentary. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely money there, and I think there's this looming threat of the state. Now they have a budget they're going to pass. I don't know if it's going to get vetoed or not. I guess that will determine what if that budget passes, presumably that's a more favorable budget to us. We won't lose the educational cost-sharing grant. Maybe that opens up some options for us. Again, I think, where I maybe would find common ground, I am not somebody, the mayor doesn't like to spend money on anything except education, which we just talked about, but
Yeah.
I would be more willing to spend money on certain things, on technology and where I get nervous, though, is I would not want to draw any of that money down for a recurring operational cost. I think that puts you in a death spiral.
So I'm going to get to Jamie in a minute, but I don't want to dwell from this point. So the $4.2 million that the mayor takes from reserves and puts into the budget, which is for operating expenses, either you don't approve of it or you don't believe it or you don't want to do it again. But that's the conundrum that the Dickinson administration has been in for years. They preach no reserves for operating expense, and then he takes $4 million.
Right, and it used to be more. It used to be more. It used to be like 7 or 8.
Justify that, and then I'll go to Jamie for his reaction.
Well, they're using it to balance the budget, but what they're doing is they're building it back in as an expense. They're paying themselves back for it, too. That's where it comes in. It's not just coming out of one line, but they're treating it like an expense in the following budget as well. So they're taking it out, but they're charging it and putting it back in.
I've heard enough, Jamie. Your commentary on my commentary as I ran down that chart.
Well, I think that chart shows pretty well what the current fund balance is. Are
Is it too much? Do you want to take it down?
I think it's definitely too much, particularly when the state is threatening it. I don't think that it's a good idea to leave that money sitting there when it's at threat from the state. What I think we should be doing with that money. Now, I'm all in favor of having a reserve. It's a good thing to have a reserve. But if we're going to lose that money, we should be doing things with that money before we lose it. Okay, so for example, let's look at some projects that would in fact increase or expand our tax base. Let's look at projects that may bring in some small business. Let's look at projects that may bring in young residents. That may not use, young residents, young families do not use as much town services as others, and I think to some extent, especially with the new train station coming in, taking a look at our lower downtown area would be the perfect project, perfect example.
I'm going to circle back to that issue in a minute, but I want to stay on fund balance. So under the Jaime Hine philosophy, if you had 2 years on the council, and if everyone thought like you thought, and you had the votes, that's what I really mean, if you had the votes, and the mayor would go along, what would that fund balance look like after 2 years of governance consistent with your direction that you just indicated?
I think you'd probably want to be down around the $15 million range. Now,
It's cutting it in half, pretty much.
It's cutting it in half.
Yeah.
It keeps the AAA credit rating. It also gives you some buffer there. I don't know that I'd want to spend that much in 2 years. I think that that's a little extreme. But I think that that's where the fund balance should be, somewhere in that range, ultimately.
Chris?
Well, I mean, you could build the hockey rink that your mayoral candidate wants to build, but we won't get into that. You could do that in a year. That wouldn't pay for all of it. I'm sympathetic to some of what Jamie's saying. I do think I think young families would use services. I mean, they have children. I think, but that's fine. I just philosophically, I wouldn't spend it because I'm worried the state's going to take it. I don't think the state targeted us because we have a big fund balance so much as I think Governor Malloy believes that the urban areas need help and the suburban areas should pay for it. That's what he believes. And whether we had a big fund balance or no fund balance, we were going to get hit with that. That's my belief. It's like your car gets stolen and the police saying you get a full tank of gas. They took it across 5 states. Next time, drive around with the tank on empty. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to blame the victim. But I would agree philosophically with drawing it down, not to 15 million. I would draw it down less than Jamie. I would draw it down to maybe a few million and look at projects. You raise a great point, though, about, this is something we talked about, economic development, assembling properties. It's something Tim Ryan talks about. That's what a fund balance lets you do. You can buy a property. That's a standing item we have on our agenda every. We don't always use it, but we have an executive session with every council meeting, which is pursuant to real estate purchasing, and we do talk about properties that are available. And again, this isn't the public doesn't hear this, but we're constantly talking about that with the mayor and looking for opportunities. So that's definitely an area we could do something.
Chris, are you saying that the fund balance at the end of 2016 is in fact too high, but it's a matter of degree? Jamie is
it's a matter of degree.
Okay.
I think I'm more. I don't want to see it grow too much more from where it is now. The fund balance didn't get this way overnight. It's years of, I think, responsible fiscal budgeting. And I understand maybe it's, people are tired of it or they don't think it's responsible. I do think it's responsible budgeting, and it didn't get that way overnight. It's years of that. But I think now we do have to look at, are there ways to invest in the town?
So suppose there's this resolution. Jamie, hypothetically, supposing you're elected, I got to set that table as a hypothetical, and then we're going to count the votes. So a motion is put up by somebody that says, well, it's the sense of the council, mayor, during budget season, that we don't grow the fund balance anymore. That when you present numbers to us, we do budgeting, all the council, let's say you get, 6, 7, 8 votes. All the councils of the mind, we don't want to grow it anymore. Jamie, you want it to go down. Maybe you'd vote against it. I don't know, but that's going to be my question in a second. And Chris, you may be afraid of the prerogatives of taking away the mayoral prerogatives, and setting a policy like that.
How would the council do that, though?
Well,
I mean, you have to change the charter. I mean, I don't know, how does the council set that?
It would just be
more of a
communicating. Yeah, that's correct. It'd be rhetorical. Communicating your frame of mind to the mayor and the comptroller that you're not sympathetic to growing fund balances. So you'd say no to that. I agree. There's practical problems.
I'm sorry. We had a long meeting last night. What am I voting on again?
So someone makes a motion.
The motion is that we're saying don't grow the fund balance?
Well, it's not binding. I'm not saying that it's binding. I never said it was binding, but it's a philosophy of the council that has never been done before. But some towns actually have a policy on the size of the fund balance. So this would be a policy. You can't control the mayor, but at least the mayor understands the frame of mind of the council. Don't grow it anymore. Don't grow. That's not what we want to see. And after the year-end results, if it's been grown, we're going to have to just sort of look even harder. It's a controversial move. I'm just trying to see if there's common ground on it, because Jamie, you said you wanted to be pretty assertive in reducing it, and you may not like that because It may be, oh, we're going to keep it the same. You know, the fund balance the same, and you may not like it either for other reasons. I'm just trying to find out. Jamie, you first on this one. Would you vote for something like that? If not, why? And if yes, why? Aha.
I would if the option is to grow it. I would if the option is to grow it. I think at this point it's irresponsible, knowing what we've just gone through, and we may be escaping the significant cuts that were threatened. It would be irresponsible of us to not look at ways that we can invest that money properly. And so I would certainly vote against or for that if the option is to grow.
Well, the option is no motion at all. You know, this is politics now. This is counting votes. That's the only motion, and that has a chance of passing. Chris, I'm going to go to you. On that motion that I
The
threw
motion
out
would
there.
be, yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of the purely rhetorical motions
That's
either.
all it would be.
Yeah, then I don't know. I mean, I think there's a way to do it during budget season. I know there was an effort this past budget season by Jason and Craig, and I think that it was well-intentioned. I think they cut some of the wrong items, like the health insurance, and I have problems with. They didn't touch education. So anyway, I don't know.
I'm going to read you a quote from John Letourneau and get your thoughts on it, and this has to do with the budget process. This was in the Record Journal. He said, by the time the mayor gives us the budget every year, there's not much to cut. In the 10 years I've served, I haven't seen places to save millions of dollars. We could make smaller cuts, but it wouldn't affect the mill rate much, and it would hurt the department we're cutting from. So unless it's a big cut, sometimes it's better not to cut. All in all, I'm pretty satisfied with our budgets. Jamie and then Chris. Your reaction to John Letourneau.
I have a lot of respect for John.
However,
I like him very much.
I hear a butt coming.
No.
No lamps for you.
That's right.
Yeah, he'll let me have it next time he sees me. But
Yeah.
I think there's plenty fluff in the budget. We just got done talking about how each year the mayor or the administration allocates a certain amount of the reserve fund towards operating expenses. Every year that's done. And it used to be higher. This past year was 4.2, and at one year it was up to about $7 million. And that money is never touched. Right? I mean, right there, you're talking $4 million to $7 million. If you take a look at the numbers, now granted they're unaudited, but if you take a look at some of the numbers from 2016-2017, for example, Public Works, we over-budgeted for them about $400,000. And so I'm not talking about cutting expenses or money that these departments need. But there's clearly over-budgeting, and there's clearly money that could be cut and done so effectively.
Chris, are you a budget cutter?
You know, we 2 years ago, my first council term, my first year in the council, I voted for a bunch of reductions to the increase.
How'd that go?
We lost each one 5-4, and they included $500,000 to education. And a bunch to the police and to a lot of other departments, and I voted for them, and they did not pass. Education ran a surplus of over $1 million. So to John's quote, I think John's quote, I'm mostly satisfied with the budgets. I do think there's room to cut. You have to look at education, though. You can't just look at 1/3 of the budget. All this talk has been about 1/3 of the budget, not about the whole budget. Education is 2/3 of the budget. I get it. It's a sacred cow. Democrats not going to want to touch that. Heck, Republicans don't want to touch it either. I understand that. But that's got to be part of the equation. So, you know, we'll see what happens.
Change the subject?
Let's keep going on this. I think we should let's put the fund balance slide up.
Really?
Lynn.
You know,
Let's
it
look at the
all
fund
comes
balance
back to money. You know, in the end,
Right.
it all comes back to money, at least with respect to the town council, because they don't really have other prerogatives. Either they appropriate money or they don't. One of the things that was in the news over the summer and may come up again in the spring is community pool. it's a large sum. It's a large sum of money. There's a sort of a romantic and sentimental attachment to it. But I don't know if you're engaged in the hard, dispassionate business of governance and balancing budgets and taxes, whether a community pool is worth it. And I'm well aware of the social media outcry and all this kind of stuff. Oh, community pool, we've got to find a way of doing it. To me, and I just want to set the table on this, it's much too slick to say we'll make it pay for itself one day. We'll put in, I'm going to make up a number, $3 million, and we'll make it pay for itself. Unless you got a strong case for it, in case I'd like to hear it, I just want to know your general approach. Jamie, will go to you, and then to Chris on community pool.
I got up and talked about the community pool at a recent town council meeting, and admittedly, I am not a big user of the community pool. However, I do believe that it's a community asset. And what I would say is that if the town were trying to close the pool, if that was their actual goal, I don't think that they could do a better job than they've done. I'll put it that way. John Golick, I think he's trying his hardest with what he has. The Park and Rec Commission, they're doing what they can with what they have. But when you take a look at the situation there, you're dealing with a limited season, limited hours. You cannot buy day passes. You have to buy 2-week passes or season passes. You cannot buy passes at the gate. You have to go to the Park and Rec Department and buy the passes there and then travel back down to the pool. In today's day and age, people aren't going to do that. They want to be able to go to the pool, buy a day pass for whoever is with them, including any guests, and enjoy themselves. That's what they want to do. And if they can't do it and it takes that much effort, they're not going to do it.
Chris,
I
your thoughts?
agree with everything Jamie said. I was at the, at the same meeting. I think that there can be a lot of improvements with how they run the pool, how they market the pool. I use the pool every week this summer with my kids, my wife. My kids and I were the last people out of the pool this year the day they closed down. I don't know that the town isn't trying to close it. The town.
This point was somewhat rhetorical.
I know. You're making a joke. No, I think though people don't realize what happens is the last 2 or 3 years in the Park and Rec minutes, the commission John has been pretty forthright in saying that the pool needs work. We make a determination every year if we can keep it going or if this is the year, and that's what prompted the report. And I felt like there's been rhetoric on both sides. I feel like there's been rhetoric of panic, people saying they're closing it. We're not closing it. Other people have been saying, oh, no, it's fine. Well, no, it's not fine. They're going to meet next month. They're going to walk through it next month. And guess what? If it comes back that they walk through with the risk manager and they walk through with Public Works, if it needs $500,000 to patch it for another season, the pool's going to be closed. There's no way the mayor's going to spend that money. I wouldn't spend that money.
Well,
no one
let's get more specific.
Yeah.
First, Chris, I'm going to stay with you and we'll go back to
Sure.
Jamie. Supposing the numbers come back substantial, between $1 and $2 million, and these service upgrades that I think everyone agrees with that Jamie was talking about, make it easier to go there and buy tickets and everything. Those are done. I mean, that's an executive decision that could be solved pretty quickly, I think. But all those service upgrades are done, but it's between $1 million and $2 million to upgrade the pool. You're on the council.
Yeah.
This is your decision.
Yeah.
How do you vote?
Well, I would vote to.
And let me just say, it would probably be bonded.
Yeah, no, I would vote for that. A few things. The pool situation. The big thing that changed with the pool, there was a near drowning on July 3rd, 2012. I was there. It happened right near me. But luckily, the boy did not drown. The lifeguards rescued him. It was I think a Sheehan swimmer, Sheehan student. What happened was after that point they went to a photo ID system. They became a lot more strict, and the pool tag sales went down. I think at its apogee in 2010, you had 5,000 pool tags being sold. Now they sold 1975, I think was the number last year.
So, where are you going
So
with
the
this?
question is, I am not. I agree with all. I mean, I said this at our council meeting. There's no video clip. I don't know where that is, but whatever. I said this though. I said that I thought I could go to Celebrate Wallingford and buy a sandwich and use my credit card. But I can't, John doesn't want the lifeguards handling cash. And I was like, that's fine. You don't need to, it's 2017. You don't have to handle cash.
But wait a minute, that's an executive decision
Right.
that the mayor can solve. So
No, I know. But
yeah.
my point is, though, if you do all that, let's say you
Yeah, that's where I'm getting at.
if you do all that, I'm not convinced that just doing that is by itself will bring the numbers back. I think the photo ID policy knocked a lot of out-of-towners out who were coming. So I think you need a lot more of a comprehensive policy. As far as to what we do with the pool, I think that I would like to see us, there's talk of a committee, look at the property. It's a good parcel. I'd like to see us maybe go to a smaller footprint, a smaller pool, maybe a splash pad, and maybe repurpose the rest of that property for something else. And I don't know what that is. If it's something, it could be anything. It could be a field. It could be, doesn't have to be aquatic related. I don't know. But I mean, I think we have to have all of our options open. And what I said at the council meeting, and I would say it here, I'm open-minded to everything. The one thing I am not open-minded for is to close that pool, and I don't want to drive by it for the next 40 years because we didn't do anything. That would bother me.
Jamie, my example was between $1 million and $2 million bonded with the service upgrades you were talking about. Motion is made and seconded. How do you vote?
I would vote for it. I think it's a no-brainer.
Even though it may not turn a profit, even though that'd be very speculative whether it's going to pay for itself.
Yeah, I think there's... So my view is that the numbers will eventually come back. I would still vote for it, understanding that there's no guarantee of that. But I would also make certain that we did everything that we could to get those numbers back. Because I think there are things that we can do. I personally don't think we market the pool properly. And I agree with Chris that a splash pad would be a good option because it would get young families with young kids to that pool from a young age, and it would keep them there as they get older and older and older. So.
There are two subjects left, and now I'm going to have to begin to triage our time because we've spent a lot of it. At the last council meeting, there was an issue of a sizable bid waiver for the police department. It was for a new radio system. I think the order of magnitude was something like $5 million, close to that. The issue is not whether or not we need a new radio system. That was not the issue. The issue is whether a bid for radio systems be waived so that the police department and fire department have already made up their mind as to who the vendor is going to be, and it's just a matter of negotiating price. The philosophy behind requiring bids is that there can be a risk that departments, that towns get too cozy with vendors. Their relationship becomes too established, and it may break the heart, and I'm being rhetorical here, of the department head to tell a favored vendor, someone they've dealt with for maybe years, we're going out to bid. The other obvious one is corruption and fraud, but I'm not going there. Where I'm going is there has to be a cold business-like arrangement between vendors and the town, and vendors have to know my contract one day is going out to bid, and I've got to stay sharp and on my toes and hope for the best. Yet, and Chris, you in the newspaper said bid waivers are a place we could save money. So what happened Tuesday night on the radio bid waiver?
How dare you?
I know. You knew this was coming.
I knew this was coming.
Yeah.
I knew this was coming. When I wrote that editorial, I knew two things. I knew that I was coming on this show, and I knew about that agenda item.
Yeah.
That was coming. Tuesday night, the police chief came before us with the fire chief, and he had Sal Menzo in the audience, superintendent of schools, and basically presented to us a plan for a consolidated radio system. And not to get too technical, we're running out of time, but they're all separate currently. Fire is separate. Fire is on a VHS system. Police are on their own system. For fire, there are certain dead spots in town where they don't get reception. There's interference. Public Works, water and sewer are not on it now. They could be part of it because there are situations where you want all of these agencies, departments involved, and also Board of Education, the 12 schools. The bid waiver, as it was presented, all the chiefs did a bunch of research, and they basically said they want to go with Motorola. It was between $5 and $7 million is the waiver, so it was worse than what you described. So I'll just clarify
No
that.
competing bids.
No
They want to
competing
go to
bids.
Motorola.
They did a lot of research, and basically they looked at other towns, and the couple factors. They said that other towns have gone out to bid. To go out to bid, you have to hire a consultant to write the specs, and other towns have paid between $50,000 and $60,000 to a consultant. That process would take up to a year or 18 months, so it would delay things by that much. They also said that other towns that went out to bid did not get a price point that they thought was any better. I think Middletown was the example they cited, but did not get a price point that much better. That Motorola has a contract with the state of Connecticut currently, and that the prices they're seeing are actually lower than what's with the state. I'll just say, yeah, I don't like bid waivers. I voted against quite a few of them up there over the last 2 years, but I've also voted for some. This wasn't my first one I voted for. It's one of those things as a counselor where you have your ideology and you have pragmatism, and you have to decide what wins out. And in this one, after hearing the presentation, hearing my fellow counselors talk, I felt it was the right thing to vote for it.
Jamie?
So I
You were
was
at the
there.
meeting too,
I was at the meeting last night,
Yeah.
and you know, I'm all for the project and the system. I think it's a great idea. My biggest issue is the bid waiver. I did not. There was a lot of talk last night about the Chiefs, and don't get me wrong. I love the Chiefs. I think they're doing a great job, but there was a lot of talk about the Chiefs having done their due diligence, and there was very little questioning regarding the information that was being presented. So, for example, there was one question regarding whether there were other manufacturers. And the answer was yes, there were. There were 3 or 4 other manufacturers. There was no follow-up question. You know, had the chiefs met with the other manufacturers? Had they met with a sales representative from the other manufacturers? The information that the chiefs presented last night, where did that come from? Did that come from the Motorola rep? Or who did the chiefs talk to? How did they obtain their information that they presented last night? How do we? There was no testing, no pushing back, and not to be disrespectful, but as a town councilor, these are questions that you have to ask because you want to make sure that you're getting the information to make a proper decision. You know, I probably would have also asked whether the information regarding the bids that were obtained from the other towns, did that information come from the representative? Did it come from the other towns? Did they speak to the actual chiefs in the other towns?
Can I just make
Yeah.
a comment? The only thing
Yeah.
I'll say there, to tie into that, in
Sure.
our packets, there was a 5-page executive summary written by Chief Wright that really got into a lot of issues. So that may be the reason why they didn't seem like there were a lot of questions. But I understand if you didn't, you don't get that packet, you're sitting in the audience.
Well, I read that packet too, I got to say, and I'm not sure it satisfied. If it wasn't the uniformed services, if it wasn't fire and police, I think it would have been a tougher road to sled to get the bid waiver. But there's something sort of magic about fire and police asking for something, and this was unanimous. But this is also $5 million, and it seemed to me the bottom line was it's too time-consuming and too inconvenient to go out to bid. And if that's the bottom line argument, I'd say request for bid waiver denied. Departments can always come up with that sort of an excuse. It's too much to do it. You're running out of time. You should have done it last year. $60,000 for a consultant. A lot of bids are put together with consultants. I mean, they just are. And the process needs, I'm lecturing here, but it's part of what we do in the Citizen Mike Show, the process needs a protector, a champion. I'm going to trip some of my own time for a very short story. Back in the day when I was on the council, the town financial, the mayor and the comptroller wanted desperately to keep the same auditor, wanted to keep the same auditor with all kinds of reasons why the same auditor that's been on the job for 10 or 15 or 20 years had to stay, stability of the town, best interests of the town, all this kind of stuff. There were two Democrats that fought hard, say enough is enough, change auditors, and eventually after an argument and a process it went out to bid and a new auditor came in, and that's the auditor we have now. But we've heard those arguments time and time again, too inconvenient, stability, relationships, all that kind of stuff. Chris, because I sort of took a view opposite yours, going to give you the last word and then move on, and we're going to cut Jaime out of this.
If you want a pro-law enforcement
Whatever you
candidate,
want to
Chris
do.
Shortell, November 7th.
Whatever.
You know, I'm sympathetic to all those arguments.
Yeah.
I hate bid waivers, and
Yeah.
I had one for the electric division a few months ago. They wanted to build a garage or something, and I heard all those arguments. I voted no.
Yeah.
This was more about equipment than relationships. So I think, let me just, this wasn't about, the auditor's a great example, but this was about the specific equipment. They use Motorola now.
Right.
The state uses Motorola now, and I know we're so good with the state. We love the state sometimes. We hate the state other times. We're very selective. I get that. But I think this one is a little different. And I also think the consequence of not doing it, of delaying this implementation by 18 months, no one else, it was unanimous. It was Craig Fishbein voted for it, Jason Zandri voted for it, Vinny Testa voted for it. If it was good enough for Testa, Zandri, and Fishbein on an issue that I think we all agree on, it was good enough for me.
Final topic. It's more political than it is policy, I suppose. And it goes to, how is this current election going to end up? Jaime, first, what do you think the town is looking for? Are they looking for a change? They just, as of yet, haven't found the right person. I mean, we don't have the election yet. I mean, maybe the Democratic candidate, will win. I'm not. But what do you think the profile is of a council candidate, such as yourself, and the mayor? And then just a couple of minutes, we'll run out of time, and over to Chris, and we'll wrap up.
Yeah, so with respect to the mayor position, I do think that there is some momentum building for change.
Okay.
Okay. And I think people are ready for change if the new candidate or the right candidate presents themselves. And I think the Democrats do have a very good candidate this time around, Jared Liu. And I know he's out working hard. And hopefully people are persuaded that he is the right person for the job. With respect to a town councilor, I think what people are looking for in a town councilor is somebody who's going to do their homework, ask tough questions, be respectful, but ask tough questions. Demand the necessary information that they need to make informed decisions. I mean, that's the job of a town councilor. So that's what I think people are looking for. And I think that's what I could certainly offer.
Chris? I was an English major in college, and my master's is in humanities. So I'm kind of a frustrated political science major. So I'm fascinated. I always think that the Democrat mayoral candidate in Wallingford I'm fascinated by the campaigns that are run, because I feel like they have a really tough road. We live in a great town. People like it. People are happy. Could it be better? Yeah, it could be better. And I think it's a tough. They're trying to make the Mitt Romney argument in 2012. They're trying to make the Bob Dole argument in '96. The Mondale argument in '84. And it's a hard argument to make against somebody who's popular. I think that. I don't know Jared Liu that well. He seems like a great guy, family man. I met him celebrate. Certainly seems like a very capable person. He's kind of running the Wallingford version of the Make America Great campaign. He's sort of banking on nostalgia and what was it? Block parties, and it's very interesting, some of the stuff he's focusing on. I don't look. I don't know if you know. I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan. So I will never, ever, ever say to you that I think anything is finished or anything's going to... We live in a world with Donald Trump as president. Brexit happened. My Falcons were up 28-3 with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, and the Patriots held the trophy. So I have no idea what's going to happen. I won't predict anything.
What
But
about a council candidate?
for a
Leave
council
enough time
candidate,
for that,
okay,
too.
so for a council
Yeah.
candidate, I think they want somebody who's funny, who has great hair, who went to Holy Cross.
Go back to the hair.
Oh, that was low. I shouldn't have gone there, Mike. I'm getting you back
I guess
for
I
your...
have no chance.
You have hair now. I'm getting you back for your reading my editorial back at me.
Fair enough.
I think Jamie, I would agree with Jamie. They want someone who's going to ask tough questions. They want somebody who's not going to be afraid to challenge the status quo. And they want the job of a town councilor is to be a good steward of the town's money, and that means looking at things like the surplus and is that responsible, and also looking at how can we cut spending. So I've been up there for 2 years. I was on the Board of Ed 2 years before that. I've tried to be that counselor. I've not necessarily always towed the party line. I think I have most of the time. I leave it to the voters to decide whether that's what they look for in a candidate or in a councilman. But
Let's make that the final word. Thanks for coming on the Citizen Mike Show. Jamie, you took a breath. Was there something I cut you off?
No, not at all.
I got to read.
No.
I got to read faces here at the Citizen Mike desk. But thanks for coming on. On election night, the Republicans are where?
we were at Gaetano's Tavern on Main.
The Democrats have a spot?
The Italian Club.
Okay, there you go. But good luck, whatever happens, and thank you for tuning in to Citizen Mike Show. We appreciate it. We're here on Wednesdays producing the show. It is broadcast on WPAA, 9 o'clock on Thursdays, and then on Fridays and the following Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But somewhere along the line, it is on YouTube. And I post a link on social media so you can check it out on YouTube. Again, thanks for tuning in, and thanks Christopher K. Shortell and Jaime Hine for being great sports and brave souls.
Good luck to you.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck.
On the Citizen Mike Show. Good night, everybody.